the Marquee Club, which is a very famous club in London, they'd started a thing called the Spontaneous Underground. And Pink Floyd, it was a regular Sunday night thing, and Pink Floyd played there for the first time on the 13th of March. Now, Pink Floyd's interesting on the touring thing, because I mentioned the fact that Roger Waters is out and about with his Us and Them tour, and he's at Uruguay, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Costa Rica and Mexico from the 3rd of November to the 9th of December. But Nick Mason, the drummer, he's also put some dates in the diary, and he's doing a thing called Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets, and he's got some gigs outlined for the 29th of April to the 4th of May 2019. But he's already played some gigs that were sold out immediately at very small venues in the UK. I think he was at Dingwalls, a club in London, and the Half Moon Pub, which again, that both venues go back a long way. So you're going to be seeing Nick Mason in some very intimate concert halls.
And it's not an understatement to say Pink Floyd is the band that came out of the psychedelic era and really succeeded compared to all the other bands. They were the big band that came out of that era.
Absolutely. I mean, interesting you should say that, because the Incredible String Band, a sort of British psychedelic folk band, their first album arrived in mid-'66, but they never achieved anything like the success of the Floyd.
Now sit your butt down.
The John Lebang Show will be right back.
And I promise you'll love it, yes?
I'd like to take a quick second here to tell you about our new sponsor, Quality One Painting. For interior and exterior painting needs, call Tom at Quality One, 313-982-2986. Tom will give you free estimates, senior discounts, and I can tell you from meeting the gentleman, he's one of the nicest guys on the face of the planet. So for a quality paint job with a professional attitude, call Tom at Quality One Painting. That's 313-982-2986. 313-982-2986. Quality One Painting.
Hey, man, it's at the bottom of the hour, man. Do you know where your kids are, man?
If you want to contact the John Lebang Show, feel free to send an email to jlebang@live.com. And if you're on Twitter, look him up at John Lebang. And don't forget to go to his Facebook page at The John Lebang Show. Now here's John.
But by the middle of '66, you got mainstream bands starting to experiment with psychedelia. The Byrds' third album, Fifth Dimension, that's got the track called 8 Miles High on it, and that's sometimes referred to as the first psychedelic record.
Interesting.
And if you're a Byrds fan, it's a great time to be checking out the listings, because Roger McGuinn, Richard Hillman and David Crosby are all on tour. Roger McGuinn's, and they're all touring just America. Both Roger McGuinn's and Richard Hillman's tour starts on the 9th of November. Roger McGuinn's goes on to the 16th of March, and Richard Hillman's finishes before Christmas on the 19th of December. And David Crosby, he starts a little earlier on the 2nd of November and finishes on the 8th of December.
So plenty of opportunities to see them. Now the Beatles got in on this whole psychedelics thing as well.
That's right. I mean, this is around the same time. We're still in the summer of '66, and that's when they released Revolver, and that includes Tomorrow Never Knows, which always crops up in any listing of the best psychedelic.
Great song.
Oh, absolutely. And Paul McCartney's on tour. I mean, all over the place: Japan, France, Denmark, Poland, Austria, UK, and America. From now basically through to the middle of June, 26th of June, my birthday, 26th of June next year. So plenty of chance to see more Paul McCartney.
Well, early happy birthday, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Just as we stay on the Beatles for just a minute, you could say they employed psychedelic methods in all just about every one of their last albums after Revolver. There was little bits of the psychedelic stuff in some of their music.
Absolutely.
Like Number 9. In a way, that's very psychedelic.
Yeah, I mean, that would well fall into the category. I mean, I mean, even though the genre pretty much burnt out by, you get to sort of 68, 69, though there's still some good stuff coming out, but it was certainly on the wane. I mean, bands who were long-term, who survived the era, as it were, as you said with the Pink Floyd, I mean, you can find elements of the music carrying on very much into the later albums. And it was really starting to come of age in the UK. And that's when the whole counterculture thing reached the UK. We had a thing called International Times, and there was a gig at the Roundhouse to launch it, basically. And it was the first UK counterculture newspaper magazine, founded by a guy called John Hoppy Hopkins, who crops up from time to time.
Hoppy was a hippie.
Yeah. Oh, he he was a big player. What the big psychedelic club was founded by him as well. And the first issue of Rolling Stone was about a year later, actually. It came out in November 67.
So, a lot of this was all happening at the same time, just popping in. That's why we got Rolling Stone magazine, or at least partially why, because they're starting at the time. Because music was huge and they covered music as well as other things, but they covered it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was a real change from the straight music papers when you got these, because they got very much into the politics and the background and the hippie culture and all kinds of things. We had Oz magazine in the UK as well, came from Australia, and that was a great magazine. And it's really kicking off now. The Pink Floyd did their first really underground experience performance. So now you've got Psychedelic Effects and Mixed Media, and that was in the October. And again, quick mention of Nick and Roger, busy on tour. And I'd just say, giving just out dates here, if you go to the website, www.rockandroll.com, rockandrollandraveled.com, the actual links to the mostly the official websites of the band, so their tour pages, and that gives all the details of exactly where they are on what dates.
Right. If you can't keep up with all the information here, you can go to Derek's website, and it's there, including the tour information.
That's right. What I like to do is do what is essentially a blog of the show, because it is just details and information that's coming out from beginning to end, really. The Electric Prunes now, the end of '66, they had I Had Too Much to Dream last night, one of my favourite singles, and that gave them a hit on both sides of the Atlantic, US 11 and 49 in the UK. They only ever had one more hit, another great song, Get Me to the World on Time in '67. That didn't fare quite so well, 27 in America and 42 in the UK.
27 in is still not shady. That's a good number to be at.
Oh, that's moving a lot of singles. But I did like the Electric Prunes. They were a fabulous band. But one of the key things in the UK was just before Christmas in 1966, a club called the UFO opened in Tottenham Court Road in London, and that was Hoppy Hopkins mentioned earlier, and Joe Boyd, who did he produced the early Floyd stuff. He got very involved in. He didn't actually produce the early Floyd. He was involved with the Floyd, and he produced a lot of other stuff as well.
And that's like the first psychedelic club.
That's very much considered to be the first psychedelic and dedicated psychedelic club in London. We're now into the Summer of Love. The 14th of January 67, you had this big event in San Francisco, sort of Golden Gate Park, and it was billed, I love this, it was billed as the powwow, a gathering of the tribe's human being. And this was really when Haight-Ashbury was becoming the centre of the hippie universe. And the event was inspired by, this is when it starts turning down, as it were, for acid, LSD. Because California, I think, was the first state to actually ban the substance in the October of '66, and this event was to mourn that, basically. You couldn't really oppose it. It was legislation, come and gone. But what it did, it brought together the Beat Generation and the hippie culture, and that's what I meant earlier. You had people like Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet, he was there, LSD Guru, Timothy Leary, and Jerry Rubin, who was a major figure in the Vietnam anti-war movements. Jerry Rubin was there as well, and there was music from the Grateful Dead, Quicksilver Messenger Service, and Jefferson Airplane. So it really was a coming together of those two 50s and 60s cultures.
And that took place in Golden Gate Park.
That's right. Yeah, 14th of January. It sort of heralds in the summer of love, basically. And Jefferson Airplane released their second album, Surrealistic Pillow, but that's the one with White Rabbit on. That was early 67. And Jefferson Airplane and Electric Tuner, who we've mentioned once or twice before, because they're always on the road, so every time they crop up, they're almost certainly going to be giving opportunities to see them. Jefferson Airplane in America, 2nd of November to 30th of March. And Electric Tuner. Now, Electric Tuner seem to do two different sets. They do an electric hot tuner and they do an acoustic hot tuner. So the dates of 10th of November to 26th of January, they vary between those two lineups. And they do have some dates in Mexico as well. And then for some reason, they've actually already put the date of the 8th of September 2019 into the diary.
No, they're planning ahead. That's good.
Oh, absolutely. Now, one of the bands that almost nobody will have heard of on either side of the pond is a band called The Smoke. And in February 67, they released a single called My Friend Jack. And it's a great single. I mention it simply because the sort of strapline is, My Friend Jack likes sugar lumps. It's a great song. It starts off with some really fuzzy guitar work, and it is well worth a listen to on either Spotify or the equivalents, or just tracking down on the internet. It's a great song, and it was the same sort of time. Now, what's happening now is psychedelia is starting to hit the charts. It's starting to become commercially successful, and Pink Floyd released their first single, Arnold Lane, in 67. It was produced by Joe Boyd. I don't know why I had a crisis of conscience earlier. It was Joe Boyd that produced it. And that was written by Syd Barrett. And, of course, Nick and Roger are on tour. And Jimi Hendrix released Purple Haze around the same time, March 67. I mean, what a fabulous single that was.
In fact, that's what got me into Jimi Hendrix. My mother had the record, I think it was Are You Experienced? Maybe, is that the one with that song on it?
Yeah, the American version track listed has that single included.
And
it wasn't on that album in the UK. What a way to break in somebody to one of the greatest American guitar players of all time. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now we're moving on to April 1967.
Yeah, back in the UK again, with what was called the 14-hour Technicolor Dream. I mean, it was an infamous British freakouts. They were called freakouts and happenings and all kinds of good things at the time. This is in Alexandra Palace in London. About 10,000 people are reckoned to be there. And what it was, International Times, the counterculture newspaper, was facing some prosecution in the UK because they kept saying things against the establishment. The establishment didn't need that. So they needed some money to defend themselves. And what's great, the flyer at the time described the gig as London's own hip newspaper, the International Times, presents giant benefit 14-hour Technicolor Dream, 30 top groups, kaleidoscopic colour, beautiful people, followed by a free be-in on Sunday. Tickets £1. I love it. Freak out.
Tickets were only £1?
£1, yeah. Oh, and I mean, if you look at it was a sort of two-stage job, and light shows, music, poetry, and I'd have people like Pink Floyd with Syd Barrett, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, The Move, Alexis Korner, Graham Bond, Yoko Ono was there.
Now the Pretty Things and Soft Machine were there as well, right?
Absolutely, and John's Children and Mark Bolan, T-Rex. He was actually part of John's Children at that time, and a band called The Creation. They're well worth hunting down. Forget the guitarist's name, but he's written to be the first guy to use a violin-style bow on a guitar. That's sometimes credited to Jimmy Page, but The Creation guy was doing it before that. And apparently Pink Floyd delivered their set as dawn broke, so that would be